Hmm. Hi, checking 1 2 3. Hi there. Hi all on PlayChess.com and streaming to YouTube. I hope there's audio on PlayChess. If there's not, well, please tell me soon on PlayChess. Right. I wonder if this is working on. Can you see a board on YouTube? Is there a board? Yeah. Okay. So this week I thought a notable game. A lot of people have been talking about is the game Magnus Carlsen against Levon Aronian in the European Cup, which is being played at the moment. So Magnus Carlsen missed the first 2 rounds actually, and it was thought Norway were reserving him for the most important matches, and the Armenian team seems to have a huge amount of camaraderie, and they do exceptionally well in these European Cup teams, Cup events, and Olympiads, I think, as well. And when Aronian was asked about that, he says, well, they really like each other. Basically, they share a lot of ideas, etc. It's not a case of, some teams you might have players keeping innovations to themselves, but apparently they really like each other, the Armenian team. Levon Aronian will also be perked up generally because he's actually the wild card entry for the world candidates coming up, which will be a really exciting event that I'm hoping to cover soon. The candidates tournament have Nakamura and loads of other fantastic players. So anyway, all right. So the European Team Championship held in Reykjavik, Iceland. Yeah. So this is in round 3. And now Magnus Carlsen playing white. Aronian hasn't beaten Magnus Carlsen for a number of years actually. He's taken a few beatings, so there's quite a big match score in favour, virtual match score in favour of Carlsen. And so, okay, e4. I wonder if we should flip the boards here, actually. Just remember it from the black perspective. Okay, Aronian is playing black. Yeah, so Aronian's 2781, Magnus Carlsen 2850. So he plays e5, and we have knight f3, knight c6, Ruy Lopez, and I'll connect a live book here. So the most popular move over the history of time is a6, but Aronian plays knight f6 a lot, which is the second most popular. And white now plays d3. This looks like a feeble sort of move. The most popular is this castles thing, but it's so theoretically trodden, this line where the imbalances are kind of the situation with the imbalances. Okay, black's got the bishop pair, white's got the structural damage, but black's thought to be generally okay most of the time, except if you're playing against Caruana. Anyway, so that line is really highly theoretical now, just castling. I know it's a natural move, but also knight c3 is being played a lot, but we see d3 in this game, which is gaining some popularity. Bishop c5. Now, in this position, let's add a Kibitzer as well. So you might be wondering, can white win a pawn here? Not really. Queen d4, okay, because the king's still in the center. But as soon as white castles, you've got to remember as black that white really is threatening simply to take and then take on e5, because d3 has supported the e-pawn, so that really is on the cards now. Bishop takes c6 is a threat in the position, and this is where the game already gets really quite interesting here, especially from my hack tech style of play. I got to say, this is a really interesting game, because I to be honest, I really love this bishop in in blitz and bullet chess. It's often doing a lot of damage on this diagonal. This bishop is an attacking player's, bishop friend. It really is. It's on a dangerous diagonal, right? And you've got soft spots potentially on the king position, f2 and h2. Now this next move is the most popular move here. It seems with 300 games in live, but is to actually support the pawn immediately, right? This issue has to be dealt with. If black castles, then we can just take it as previously mentioned. Yeah, there's not much of a gambit here going on. This is just supposed to be good for white. So black's major two responses here are limited. The two main responses, where there's hundreds of games each, it's either a case of d6 supporting e5, so without castling, or knight d4. And by the way, you might be wondering, why have I emphasized this e5 pawn? Because I played black here against John Nunn in a blitz game, and I forgot about e5, and it was really embarrassing when he just won a pawn straight out of the opening, so it wasn't much a game after that. So yeah, it is something you've got to bear in mind here with d3. Okay, so d6 is the most popular, and for example, this is a popular thing. c3 now, castles, knight here, a6, bishop dropping back. There's 34 games even from here, so this is the kind of flavour of the position to be expected, right? On d6, that's the most trodden path. But in this game we get a slightly rarer move in knight d4, and yes, that's moving a piece twice even without castling. So the rule break here, is it justified? Let's have a quick look. What is going on here with knight d4? If knight takes e5, is this some sort of poison pawn? Yes. Knight takes b5. Yes. Knight d4 hits that bishop. And if the bishop actually went back more sensibly to a4, then this is supposed to be about equal. White loses that defensive knight, and then black castles, and it seems to be a good looking position generally. I'm not sure what there is to worry about here for black. There might not be anything much to worry about. Even if you allow this pin, I don't think it's a big deal, just this, and I don't think this is a big deal. This would be dynamic play with the two bishops, so that wouldn't be a big deal at all for black. So this knight d4 is it's an alternative here, and usually white does take on d4. So we have bishop takes d4, c3, bishop b6, and often the knight moves now to harass this bishop on b6. So either knight d2 or knight a3 are the two most common moves. Both share the use of that. You could go to c4 after. Bishop g5 has also been played here, but in this game we get knight a3. So the idea of this drunken knight is to go to c4, and okay, here we have c6, from a theoretical point of view c6 is the most common. Bishop drops back, and black often castles here. In this game d6, that's quite popular as well. Just play d6, and here's like a subtle nuance in this position. In live, this is the most common move, and I think there is a definite idea behind it. It's not just a case of memorizing loads of stuff. There's 18 games compared to 8 here. It would be amazing if you guys could actually realize the reason why knight c4 is thought to be the move. And the reason I bring this up is Aronian did a little interview about this game, and he was expecting knight c4. So I don't know, if I ask this question, why is bishop b3 inferior in theory to knight c4? If I give you 20 seconds to think about that question, and post your answers. Why is bishop b3 supposed to be inferior to knight c4? Does anyone know? Anyone want to take a guess? A6 and bishop a7, very good. Yeah, black with that dark square bishop actually would like to keep the bishop on the diagonal. I believe that's like the major reason. Black wants to tuck the bishop away on a7. So the thing is, yeah, if white plays here knight c4, this is the most common move, then there's no time for a6. We can just snap that off, and of course there's a few extra dark square weaknesses that would be pleasant for white. But in this game we actually get a surprise move, and it has been played before though. There's 8 games in live book with bishop b3. It would be interesting to know what those games are with bishop b3. If I can just quickly, no, I don't think I can easily check that out. Okay, but yeah, bishop b3 allows black the possibility of keeping the bishop on the diagonal. And you might not think, well, is that a big deal or not? It's kind of a big deal here, because it's not just f2 but h2. You know, things like this, it's dangerous, this position, because there's no defensive knight, and that fact can be celebrated. There's no defensive knight on f3, which makes h2 a bit more sensitive than usual. Yeah. So there's 2 ways to try and preserve the bishop. Also, white might not be interested in having double pawns either. Now in the game, a5 was played instead of the routine castling. So a5 would seem to be a more accurate move than the stereotypical just castling. But what about a6? I mean, isn't a6 here? Let's have a quick look at this position. This might have achieved the same thing as well. But as it turns out, a5 turns to make the game a lot more interesting than a6 actually. So black's got 2 choices to try and preserve the bishop on this diagonal. Chooses actually a5. Very, very interesting. A5. I'm not sure. Has this been seen before too much? Not much. Usually castles is 4 games. And funny enough, there aren't that many games with a6. It's either between castles or a5 the main games. So anyway, a5. And we have knight c4, and the bishop can now tuck on a7. So it looks as though black has done quite well out of the opening phase of the game. And you might think, oh, hold on a second, is this really a big deal? What about bishop e3? Bishop e3 might run into something horrible actually. Yes, bishop e3 actually runs into something horrible. It's a natural move to challenge the bishop, but what does it actually run into? What can black... Oh, if I pose the question actually, what can black play here to bishop e3? Any ideas? I'm not sure about d5. Let's have a quick check on d5. No, knight takes e5. You just want a pawn. No, black here apparently is a significant advantage. Well, to black with b5. So if takes here, we take on here. We've got both bishops attacked. And if the knight moves, then we can double the pawns. So this doesn't look too hot. And actually, we can stretch out here, and it's very, very nice for black. Unless the pawns are really justified, the double pawns, then this is a nice position for black. He's still got nice pressure on the diagonal potentially with the queen. Okay, so here a4 is played, which fixes the a5 pawn, and now black finally castles. We have bishop g5 as though punishing this bishop being over here. Why not just pin this? Isn't there anything to be gained from this pin? Actually, now you might also think the queen, is she overloaded? Is the queen overloaded, actually protecting a5? This is why a5 makes the game so interesting here. So black actually accepts the possibility of losing the a5 pawn now, because white can forcefully bring the queen away from the defense of a5. If the bishop didn't want to do this, this position is okay for black. So Magnus tested this. This looks a little bit on the materialistic side, because it is bringing out the queen to a coordinating position with that bishop on a7. But what about this pawn? You see, the thing is, it can actually be taken, yes, and this tactic doesn't work because rook takes f2. We're hitting the queen. Yeah, we can't just get time to do that. So black actually has lost a pawn. So Aronian's comment is actually he's used to playing a pawn down when he plays black in the Ruy Lopez, and I thought that was a very, very interesting comment by him, just from a philosophical point of view, because I've always thought Aronian isn't just solid. You know, the caricature of solid is passive. A lot of people try and play solidly in club chess, and they end up, you know, playing really passively and losing. So maybe he does treat, although he starts with a solid opening, it doesn't mean he doesn't want to be dynamic and have active pieces. So I thought it was an interesting kind of throwaway comment. He likes being a pawn down in the Ruy Lopez. He's just used to it. Very interesting comment. So it's like trying to get the advantages of being a solid player, but also having some of the perks of being an aggressive, dynamic player. So if you mix both together, you've got the advantages of both worlds, right? You want to play solidly, but not passively. How do you do that? So he sacked a pawn. Is black's position passive? What is it about this position for black? Black has the two bishops, clearly. There's a potential to do some naughty stuff, maybe with the bishops later. If the queen gets out of the way, maybe if the king gets out of the way, there's f5 as well. So we've got these bishops which could conspire with the queen here. There's another interesting aspect of the position which is kind of subtle, I think, in Ruy Lopez's, where black is often keen to get in the move d5, and actually the move d5 works in this position, tactically at least. d5 is played, and you might wonder, what on earth is the point of playing a move like d5? Is that d file really going to be of any use to black? And what, you know, why should it be of any use to black to open up the d file? But it is a very common move. So black is officially a pawn down. It does also restrict the knight. Yeah, the knight hasn't got any squares. Now Magnus can't really take this d5 pawn to be 2 pawns up. It'll be full of poison here. Well, a little bit of poison because of queen d8. And then both pieces are attacked. And this is just not good to be a piece down here. Engine thinks black's doing quite well anyway. Black's got active pieces. These pawns are going to be too slow to get moving up the board. So it seems d5 is technically possible, but you might wonder, why has it got any effect? Well, let's see the course of the game though. So d5 is playable in this position. So we've got this best of both worlds. I mean, a lot of you might be striving to play, you know, solidly, and you've missed a trick. You know, if you follow Aronian, actually he's prepared to be a pawn down. The trick is to be active and aggressive with it. Yeah. So okay. And Magnus plays another timid looking move, bishop c2, like a frightened little rabbit. But he's the world champion, yeah? Isn't he just going to consolidate a pawn up? Is he just going to move his knight to b3 at some point? Okay. And why does black... Sorry, why does white not want to just take there and play this position? This position here is okay for black. It seems the engine thinks black has full compensation for the pawn, or is even a tiny bit better. Bishop d7, and we've got some pressure points. We've also got some mobility potential with e4 later, so this might be a soft spot target. So that's one point of d5. If you get these two pawns here, they're lurking, aren't they, for e4 at some point, maybe. We just follow this, knight b3. Let's just see what is the science behind d5. d4 might also be useful, just blunting this bishop, just boxing in the bishop. But there's other ways of playing the position. So it's an active, aggressive position for black in this possibility of e takes d5. But yeah, Magnus he tries to keep a strong point of e4 in his position. And then we have d takes e4, d takes e4, and black is first to occupy the d file. And the cynic might say, what's the point in occupying the d file? Isn't white just going to play rook d1 at some point and exchange off the rooks? Let's have a look. Rook d8 is played, hitting the queen. Now, does the queen want to go to e2? I think this is the first major point. Actually, the queen seems slightly restricted in useful possibilities here. If the queen goes to e2, there's trouble brewing in this position already. The two bishops are up to no good here. Queen f4 would threaten rook d2, and you think, well, white's got time to challenge the d file. What is this? Let's see. If rook d1, bishop g4, bang. Of course, the pawn's pinned, and we've got the crossfire of the two bishops, bang. The d file has proven itself to be really dangerous for d2 here on a natural move queen e2. So in fact, d5 works for both bishops in this variation. They're loving it, right? But also, let's say queen f3. Black could take. Rook d2, bang, first, quick, rook d2. King's got an escape here, so there's no little cheapo trick on the back row. We can just munch this bishop, yeah? There's no back row mate. So getting fast, effective use of the d file, even if it's shared, seems actually quite a dangerous idea, and it forces Magnus into another weird looking move. Queen c1 just looks terrible. It looks away from the king. Bishop g4 again is going to be dangerous. Bishop e2, and we've got a crossfire on f2. If the bishop moves, queen takes f2. Queen doesn't want to go there. How is white going to contest the d file? So the queen ends up going, by a process of elimination here, to e1. To e1. This looks extremely weird. You might think, has white just started playing chess last week or something? No, but this is the world champion. The pieces look just visually bad. The rooks are not really connected. The knight seems a bit greedy. The bishop is blocked in by its own pawn. Black seems to be quickly using the d file, and it seems as though black could even consider a move at first glance like bishop g4, but to keep possession of the d file. But maybe that's not so convincing. Bishop d1, and white can grovel there. But actually, Levon plays what seems to be a very, very strong move. Queen g5, creating a focal point of the queen and rook on d2. If a rook lands on d2, there's pressure on f2. But there's also now bishop h3 on the cards. So it's not just rook d2, there's bishop h3, just to try and mate on g2. So there's two issues. So does white have time actually to even play rook d1 to contest the d file? No. Bishop h3 immediately. And what do you do about that? You're going to just lose the exchange. You're just going to lose the exchange, or even worse, queen g4, and you're going to come into f3 and mate here. This is diabolical. If takes takes, this is actually a forced mate in 8, this position. It's actually a forced mate in 8, whatever white does. If bishop d1, we can take here, and we get another beautiful crossfire. Queen takes e4, pawn pinned, white's getting mated on g2. It's a mate in 4, this position. So it can turn very dangerous with this d file. Very, very dangerous. So queen g5 has a lot of venom to it. Bishop h3, very crude. Yeah. Rook d2. So very, very dangerous position already for white. White's playing like a fly. Aronian has played a solid opening, and you don't consider solid openings to be this aggressive and dynamic. And that's kind of the beauty of this game. It's symbolic of an entire philosophy of playing a solid opening in inverted commas. He's made it into an aggressive gambit. Yeah. So king h1. So the world champion is actually facing an aggressive gambit here, in effect. And now a rook is on the 7th rank. Rook d2, hitting in both directions. f4 fails immediately. Queen takes g2. Checkmate. So it's gaining a tempo on the c2 bishop. So who would have thought that black's d5 is actually very, very serious about a d-file invasion. Incredible, but d5 as the prelude to this shows, yes, a rook is going to hit the 7th rank here, unchallenged. So gaining a tempo on that bishop d1. And now we have the move bishop e6, another very, very strong move, seemingly saying to the knight, well, you're not going back, are you? And I might be winning a pawn here with rook takes b2, or I might be doubling the rooks. Rooks like to be doubled on the d-file. So a difficult position, very, very difficult position. So the immediate rook takes b2 is addressed also with this move, now b4 getting out of the way. Rook a d8, beautiful. The rook's doubled on that d-file. What is white doing here? Black's really got a fantastic position, and in fact black would want to also double on the 7th rank if given the time. Rook b2 and rook d2 and double, and we've got 3 pieces coordinating then on f2. It'll be horrible, and that f pawn can't move. The queen's just waiting there. So anyway, white, Magnus takes another pawn. Knight takes b7. There's a big downside to this move. So before we go into it, this is what was played. Knight takes b7. But what is white actually doing in this position? If he tries to move the knight back, which might have the motive, to go here to blunt the bishop, rook b2 might be the strongest. But also reasonably strong is rook takes d1. But there's even stronger apparently, because that wins some material. But there's even stronger here with rook b2, just letting the knight go here, and we still got bishop c4. If rook g1, kick the knight. Where does the knight go? Here. Takes, and we've just won a piece. Yeah, so it's pretty nasty stuff what's going on here. So you've got to be careful about that knight. So anyway, knight takes b7. We have bishop c4. Because the knight, look at that weakness of the last move, it was covering the c4 square, it's not. Bishop c4, hitting the rook. So everything's at full blast. It's like a full blast furnace. These pieces are all super, super duper aggressive in this position. Black has got possession of that d-file. As you know, in football, possession's a really big thing. If you follow football, which I don't. But knight d8. Okay, knight takes d8. Why isn't knight takes d8 a problem for black? Well, he's hitting the rook. So this is what happens. We enter into a forcing sequence now. White plays knight takes d8. Black plays bishop takes f1, threatening. Queen takes g2, mate. So white has to take that. Now, there are beautiful opportunities afforded when you don't consider ordinary recaptures. So you might consider the ordinary recapture here of queen takes d8. In fact, the ordinary recapture leaves black with not much after bishop e2, because in fact the pawns white grabbed before are now quite dangerous pass pawns here, and white's in control of the position here. So that ordinary recapture fails miserably. So can you guess what black played instead? If rook takes d8, that's even worse, just bishop f3, and white's pretty solid, he's got the extra pawn or two. So black in this position plays black to play here. What would you play in this position? Black to play. Okay, rook takes f2, yes, hitting the queen, and on g2, so leaving white with few alternatives here. You might think, can white, well, rook takes f1 is actually a mate threat as well, right? In the game, queen g1 was played. It looks odd, queen g1, right? What's anything better than queen g1? It might actually be the strongest move technically in a position. If takes, this isn't a very convincing queen sacrifice here. The knight's still attacked. Queen could come in here, threatening mate. Here, queen takes, threatening the rook. Yeah, threatening the rook. Goes here. We win this pawn. It's interesting, but it looks as though black should be doing quite well here. Black sticks the bishop on d4 and threatens again queen a2. Yeah, it's a wonderful variation. So anyway, so queen takes f2 doesn't seem too tempting. So queen g1 was played, but this bishop, yeah, is a nice bishop on this diagonal. And so another move, instead of recapturing on d8, again, this isn't great for black if that happens. It's better than before, but it isn't brilliant for black. This is good for black, this position. The position is really quite strong here, a small advantage for black. But instead, what can we do with this bishop? Black to play here. What would you do in this position? I hope most of you haven't seen this game, just to create some suspense, some murder mystery and suspense. Yeah, black to play here. Okay, as some of you seem to have guessed. Anyone else want to have a go? Okay, anyone else? Black to play. All right, yeah, rook a2. So hitting this loose piece here and hitting the queen, and the queen cannot take here. Obviously, it's pinned down to g2, right? Checkmate. So basically, this is unfortunate. If queen here, we're just going to munch. We are going to munch this. No problem. Great for black. There's a slight. You think there's a slight coordination, accidental coordination. Queen takes f7 is big trouble for white after king, either king here or here. Because where's the next check? The bishop is pinned. It's no good. Okay. So basically, rook takes a2 was played. So a sort of queen sacrifice to try and play with two pieces and the extra two pawns on this side of the board. Remember, it's a 3-to-1 pawn majority. So if white can survive, then white might even have a chance of winning the game. Now, the routine. Okay, there's two things to take here. Well, to consider. Well, queen takes d8 might be quite good, but also what was played is also quite interesting. Two very strong moves are available. Queen c1 was chosen, not taking that knight, but instead going for the bishop, because that bishop's pinned and it's not going anywhere. So he actually went for the bishop instead of the knight. The engine actually thinks taking a knight, by the way, was well, at a certain depth, 20. It reckons this was quite good. But you know, you've got to be worried about these pawns being supported by two pieces. Queen h4 threatens queen e1 check, and queen takes e4. This queen e1 pins down the bishop, and this might be a short-term horizon effect, because once the pawn reaches a6, this is now really getting a bit dangerous. But for some reason, I don't know, maybe it looks more dangerous than it is. Queen b3 harassment on this side of the board. Taking here. Isn't this queening? Check. No, it's not. Okay, so maybe the engine is right. Who knows? Queen takes d8 might have done the trick without having these pawns queening. But in the game, they have queen c1. But black still has to wipe out these pawns somehow after getting a piece. Yeah, queen takes d1, so it's queen against rook and knight and these pawns. Are they going to be given a chance? The queen is hitting that knight immediately. It takes another pawn, so the pawns are ready to roll, are they? Queen b3, harassment of the rook. If the rook goes here, then it's end of the rook, check, winning the rook. So the rook goes here, losing the a pawn or the c pawn. Funny enough, if black takes the a pawn, white's almost back in the game entirely after the knight takes e5, almost entirely back in the game. You see that these two connected passed pawns have got great potential, and if black cannot win these pawns, then this is going to be extremely tricky, this sort of position. Knight d3, say. This is going to be a fortress time and a draw. Got to try and avoid any fortress opportunities. So a very good move here. He's still keeping on his toes, so to speak. It's actually, the engine thinks this is the absolute best move. It's no trivial task. You might think this is a trivial win. It's not. There's two pieces here for the queen and these dangerous passed pawns that are connected. Queen takes c3 seems to be the right move. So threatening the rook and the knight. We have now rook d6, which might be one of the strongest moves, holding the knight. And now black plays this check. And the idea is to kind of win this pawn with a check. So king e3, check, winning this dangerous pawn. And this is a different scenario. Now, is it fortressy as before? No, because black's going to lose. Black's going to win this b pawn on knight takes e5. Knight takes e5 is played. Queen takes b4 appears to be possible. There's no major trap there, but a check was played, which is interesting. This is another strong move. You might think that's really tempting. Why not just take this b pawn here? There doesn't appear to be a major trap. Black appears able to take that on a check. Not sure. Doesn't look too fortressy. Anyway, in the game, we have queen c2 check. Okay, so what's the point of this? Well, it's tempting the loss of the knight, for one thing, almost. The knight's kind of loose here. King goes here. And you might think, is check the idea to win the knight? Well, actually, isn't there? Okay, let's have a look. Here, knight d3 is going to be a bit tricky. Although it still might be good for black. But black plays a remarkably interesting move now. And we've gone into a completely different subject of how to avoid the opponent having fortresses. And it seems somehow linked to central control. So this is, I think you could consider this as a fortress breaking move. This next move from black, trying to make the pieces more unstable. So how can you make white's pieces more unstable in this position? There is a move which basically takes it to almost, technically +3. Black to play here to create maximum instability in the white position. Can you see what black can play? To make the pieces as loose as possible so they fall off. Now, these questions about G5, I don't think G5 does that. Some have mentioned G5, F6. Let's have a look. G5, Knight D3, and it's getting a bit fortressy. Yeah, getting a bit fortressy. It's not trivial to break white down. Not trivial. So not G5, F6, check. Again, white's pretty solid. No, the move which seems to undermine white's position and engines really like is F5. So the queen is immediately threatening. Queen takes E4, winning the knight, right? This is a central pawn. It's like dislodging a central pawn. Who would have thought that the concept of the fortress position is linked with central control, central grip? Well, if the opponent has central pawns, they can provide central outposts to the pieces to hold the fortress more. So maybe there is a logical link between undermining the center and undermining the fortress. This is an undermining central move, trying to undermine white's center. If takes, just loses a piece immediately, right? And loses everything immediately if it takes, virtually. So yeah, it's undermining the center. We have the move Rook D3, F takes E4. So white's center has been undermined, and also now losing the G2 pawn. Knight F3, check, and now the B pawn is there for the taking. That seems safe enough to take, but actually G5 is played here. So Queen F4 check, and all of a sudden black's got, by chipping out that pawn, black now has a 2-to-1 pawn majority, and if these pawns go, that will increase the instability of white's position. So the distance away from some fortress will be further increased. White's position will start to be unstable. We have King F2, Queen F5. You can immediately see now two threats, Queen takes and G4. So taking out that pawn, there's king safety issues. You see, look, there was a center pawn there. Black now has access to F5 with the Queen, which is reasonably near the center. So that's another aspect. If you knock out your opponent's center pawns, then you can get more central grip for your own pieces, more influence, more double attacks, more instability of the opponent's pieces. So G4, Queen takes D3, two immediate threats here. Rook D8 check. White is now unstable. King G2. White is unstable. He has to deal with the G4 threat. We have King G2, G4. Now here the knight might consider D4. It actually played to D2. If knight D4, this is nearly +4 for black. Check. This position, just H5. And the instability should be expressed in some sort of zugzwang. Have we got some sort of zugzwang here where white's going to be losing bits? If B5, then there's a check. We can take here. And if King G2, then there's h4, with h3 now introduced. So it is pretty dangerous. The knight actually went to d2. Okay. And here, the queen's quite central, but further centralizes with queen e6. So threatening queen c6 check, which will grab this rook. This rook's there for the taking after that. The king is almost forced onto a dark square. Let's just check that. Say b5. No, not b5. We can't easily verify that. If rook d3, queen e2. Okay, if rook d4, queen e2 check, and the rook's dropping off or something, or not, h5, and then white's in big trouble. Again, h4, h3 is like coming. So anyway, after queen e6, white does appear to be in big trouble here. On b5, let's just check b5 check, and we can just take that pawn after. So yeah, white played knight f1. Now queen c6 check, and Magnus Carlsen resigned here. Now, why, if king g3, then queen f3 check, forget taking the rook. This is just the mate in 2, actually. But he could also just like take the rook as well with check. Take the rook next. But there's a mate in 2 there. King f2, check, wins the rook, if nothing else. Yeah, win the rook. Or not. No, the rook hasn't got any square. We're winning the rook. Can't go back. Can't go back here. So yeah, instability has been created. Pieces are loose. And f5 is instrumental to that. So if you ever need to break a fortress in some of your games coming up, just consider central control. It does two things. It means the opponents are not so welded to the center. And if your pieces start getting to the center, they can increase the frequency of double attacks, etc., and pressure on the opponent generally. But also it had the implication of winning g2, which created a pawn majority in any case. So queen c6 check is the point where Magnus Carlsen resigned. And I know the problem with these games now, Magnus Carlsen's shield, this invincible shield, is starting to look a bit fragile. I think this hasn't been a great year. Magnus also managed to lose to Grischuk earlier in the year, and he never lost to Grischuk before. So it seems grandmasters are getting more comfortable, the super grandmasters are getting more confident against Magnus Carlsen. The period of invincibility hasn't been shown this year. There was a time people were talking about him getting to 2900, etc. I think there's going to be less talk about that. And his next game he drew with some 2560 as well, called Hansen in his next game. But yeah, a fantastic game from Aronian. Some people have mentioned on Reddit, you know, people talk about as though this game is Magnus Carlsen losing and not Levon Aronian winning. The reason for that is, well, Levon's a great player, but I think some people think it's more of a surprise Magnus Carlsen losing. It's all a matter of perspective. It seems as though White played timidly. We get the impression White was forced into a timid setup. But this is the importance of opening finesses. At this level, you know, the difference between not kicking out the bishop from the diagonal or kicking it out can have serious implications later if the opponent is prepared to further invest in what seems to be a tiny issue. You know, the bishop seems to be a tiny issue, but if the opponent is prepared to further invest via a positional pawn sacrifice in that apparently tiny issue, it can be magnified, and all of a sudden black's playing for the d file and the bishops are usefully cross-firing, and white just played as though white played a really passive game. But yeah, Levon Aronian really seemed to fully exploit an opening inaccuracy. What do you guys think? Is that a fair assessment? Levon Aronian fully exploited a slight opening inaccuracy, and that is why I think it's very important when you see games video annotated, someone needs to use Livebook to tell you what moves are actually played and what are not, because those can actually be the moves, the key turning points early on in the opening, where some advantage is magnified later on to become a decisive advantage. Black played very dynamic aggressively after. Keep it with that bishop on the diagonal. Okay, so I hope you got something from that game. I'm not sure we should cover any more games tonight, so we'll carry on next week, maybe looking at some other European Cup games. Okay, so yeah, thanks very much. Thanks for coming. And comments or questions on YouTube as well, if you've got any other questions. Also, please remember to like the video. Yeah, to like this stream. That would really help the social marketing of the video, to get other people watching it potentially that didn't. So remember to click like if you did like this discussion of this game this week. Okay, all right. Thanks very much.